Welcome to Excellent Grades Academy. This is Dr. Byson EM. Today we're looking at the respiratory system histology, which is practical lab number 14. Let's look at the objectives. So objective number 1 is to give the constituent parts forming the conducting and the respiratory portions of the respiratory system. So as we know, the respiratory system is made up of the conducting portion and the conducting portion and the respiratory portions. So very soon we're going to look at the parts that make up the conducting portion and the respiratory portion. Number 2, to distinguish respiratory epithelium from olfactory epithelium and give their specific occurrence, where they occur. Number 3, you describe the detailed microscopic features of the various parts of the respiratory system. This is where it gets very interesting. So we're going to look at all of that. Number 4, you infer the functions of each part of a respiratory tract from their microscopic features. 5, we're going to look at and describe the developmental aspect of the respiratory system and the common developmental pathologies. And lastly, we're going to name the common pathological conditions and the anatomical and physiological basis. All right, so now this is just a scheme, a diagram that shows the parts of the respiratory system. So it starts from the nasal, from the nose here, to the nose here, and then we've got the frontal sinus and the sphenoid sinus. You know that the sphenoid and the frontal sinus are just air-filled spaces, okay? Then we've got the nasal concha, which separates the nasal cavity into 3 parts called the meatus, the superior, the middle, and the inferior meatus. And then from the nasal cavity, we've got the pharynx. The pharynx will lead into the larynx. The larynx will go in the trachea. Then the trachea will bifurcate into what we call the bronchus. The bronchus will now bifurcate into bronchioles. Then the bronchioles will bifurcate into respiratory bronchi, and then go to alveoli. Okay. So this is the respiratory system. So all of these aspects that we've talked about here, the parts of the respiratory system, we have to know how they look histologically. All right. So now, the respiratory system is made up of the conducting portion and the respiratory portion. So the function of the conducting portion is to conduct or filter and warm and moisturize air. But the respiratory system is where gaseous exchange and secretion of the surfactant takes place. Now, these are the parts of the conducting portion. So you have the nasal cavity, the pharynx, the larynx, the trachea, the primary bronchi, both in the left and in the right lungs, the secondary, tertiary bronchi, and the terminal bronchi. The respiratory portion of the lungs include the respiratory bronchus, the alveolar ducts, the alveolar sacs, and the alveoli themselves. So this is very important to know. Very, very important to know. So know the conducting portion and the respiratory portion. So in summary, you can just say respiratory system. So respiratory system is made up of 2 parts. Okay. 2 parts. Part number 1 is the conducting portion. Conducting portion. In the conducting portion, you name all of these. Part number 2 is the respiratory portion. So in the respiratory portion, you name all of respiration portion, you name all of these. All right. So now let's look at the histology of the olfactory epithelia that is found in the nasal cavity. So the olfactory epithelia is found in what we call the superior concha or the nasal concha bone. Okay, that is found in the nasal cavity. So now we're going to distinguish between the olfactory epithelia and the respiratory epithelia. We've already alluded that the olfactory epithelia is found in the superior nasal concha. So it lines the superior nasal concha. The middle and the inferior nasal concha are lined by what we call respiratory epithelia. Now, the difference between these two types of epithelia is that the olfactory epithelia is a neurosensory epithelia. It contains cells that are capable of sensing smell, whilst the respiratory epithelia doesn't have this aspect, this characteristic. So number one, the olfactory epithelium lines the upper part of the cavities. It is a high ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelia. In the lamina propria, you should observe the acini of the glands, which are called Bowman's glands, and the bundles of nerves. The respiratory epithelia is a low pseudostratified columnar epithelia. So that's one difference. The olfactory epithelia is high ciliated pseudostratified columnar, whilst the respiratory epithelia is a low pseudostratified columnar ciliated epithelia. So the respiratory epithelia further has plenty of goblet cells. So you're going to see a lot of goblet cells in the respiratory epithelia, whilst in the olfactory epithelia there won't be any goblet cells. That's the second difference. Deep to the epithelia are mucus and serous glandular acini and many dilated blood vessels to the surface. The reason of the abundant dilated blood vessels that are found in the respiratory epithelia is that these warm the air that enter the nose. So the air is in close proximity with the blood, which has got a higher temperature. So there are abundant blood vessels in the respiratory epithelia for the purpose of warming the air that is breathed in. All right. Now, the olfactory epithelium, we're going to look at three principal cells. Number one, we've got the large supporting sustentacular cells, which have got the pale nuclei and long microvilli. So these, the nucleus of these, the sustentacular cells are in the uppermost portion. So they are in the uppermost stratum of the olfactory epithelium. And then we've got the long olfactory receptor cells with darker, elongated nuclei and long cilia. These olfactory receptor cells are in the middle. They're in the middle stratum of the olfactory epithelium. And then we've got the basal cells whose nuclei are near the basement membrane of the epithelium. So now it is difficult to distinguish the individual cells in the slide. However, what you should know is that the sustentacular cells, the nucleus, are in the uppermost portion. And then the olfactory cells, the nucleus, are in the middle portion. The basal cells, the nuclei, are in the basement, near the basement membrane. That's how you differentiate the cells in the olfactory epithelium. Let's look at the slide. So this is our slide at low power. So this is olfactory epithelium at low power. So olfactory epithelium. Let me just point at it. So it is here. So this is olfactory epithelium. What from here up to here, this is olfactory epithelium. And this part here that you see on top, this is what we call the cilia. So this is cilia. You can't really appreciate it very properly because it is at low power. Okay? It is at low power. Let us look at it at medium power. So this is at medium power. So from here up to here, this is the epithelium. So this is the olfactory epithelium. Epithelium. From here up to here, this is the cilia. You can see. So now, when you notice this portion here, from here up to here, there are a lot of nucleus. So this is what we call pseudo-stratified columnar epithelia with cilia. So the type of epithelium that we find in the upper portion of the nasal cavity is what we call pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium with cilia. All right, with cilia. Okay, so from here up to here, this is pseudo-stratified columnar epithelia with cilia. Now, what you notice is that this olfactory epithelia, which is pseudostratified columnar epithelia, has got three types of cells. So the first type of cells is what we call the sustentacular cells. And then you've got olfactory cells. And then you've got the basal cells. So all of these are here. We can't tell them apart here because this is at medium power. We'll tell them apart when we go and look at it at high power. Okay. So what you see here, this part here, and this part here, even this part here, these are glands. Okay. These are what we call Bowman's glands. They are mucus glands. They produce mucus. Okay. And as you can see here, this is a blood vessel here. So that is a blood vessel. All right. So that is a blood vessel. This here is also a blood vessel. So those are blood vessels. Draw them like that and label them to be blood vessels. So those are blood vessels. What you see here, these are nerves. So those are nerves. And then here, this is just cartilage. Okay, hyaline cartilage. So hyaline cartilage, which is continuous with the ethmoid bone. Okay, which is just continuous with the bone. So this is pseudostratified columnar epithelia in the olfactory epithelia. Draw it at medium power, and now let's look at it at high power. So this is how it appears at high power. So now look at this. This one here, this is a cilia. These nucleus that you see in the apicalmost part, these are the nucleus of the sustentacular cells. Sustentacular cells. The nucleus that are on the middle here, those are the nucleus of the olfactory cells. So the olfactory cells will also have cilia here that has got neural properties. The olfactory cells are the ones that sense smell. Okay. And then the cells here that are on the base, the nucleus that you see here on the base, near the basement membrane, these are the basal cells. So in olfactory epithelia, you've got three types of cells: sustentacular cells, which are just supporting cells, olfactory cells, and basal cells. All right, what you see here, this is the blood vessel. All right, and then these, what you see, these are glands. Okay. So this is a Bowman's gland. It produces mucus that will go and moisturize and secrete its secretions to the epithelia. What we see here, this is a nerve, olfactory nerves. So these are olfactory nerves. This one here is a blood vessel. How do I know it's a blood vessel? Because it has an endothelium here. These are the nucleus of the endothelial cells. Okay, and it's one layer. As you can see, you draw it like this. It's one layer. and it has these red blood cells inside. So this is a blood vessel as well. So this is a blood vessel. All right, that is the blood vessel. So this is olfactory epithelium in all its glory. Identify the structures, know how it looks like, and never struggle to identify it. Draw this at high power as well. All right. So this is just the same olfactory epithelium at using another slide. Okay, so these are the nerves here, Bowman's glands, and then this is the epithelia that has got the 3 types of cells. Okay, so that was olfactory epithelium. Let's look at the histology of the larynx and the epiglottis. Now, the larynx is the passageway for air between the oropharynx and the trachea, okay, and functions in the production of sounds. So now, this here is coming from the oropharynx. So oropharynx, air is coming like this. Okay, and then this part is what we call the larynx. This part is the larynx. The larynx has got this part here, which is called the ventricular fold. So it's called the ventricular fold. The ventricular fold is also known as the fourth vocal fold. Fourth vocal fold. Okay, and then it forms these parts here that are called ventricles. So this is a ventricle. A ventricle. And then the ventricle will now form this fold here, which is called a true vocal fold. So this is a true vocal fold. Okay. Now, you as you can see, these fourth vocal folds are surrounded by this epithelium. You can't really see properly, but this is non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. And then this non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium will now enter the ventricle. In the ventricle, it changes and it becomes simple columnar epithelium. So here it's simple columnar epithelium. This simple columnar epithelium will come and cover the vocal folds. When it comes out of the ventricle and covers the true vocal folds, it changes back to non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Okay, now you see that the fourth vocal folds here will be differentiated from the true vocal folds here, because the true vocal folds are attached to this structure here. This is what we call the vocalis muscle. Vocalis muscle. So in the mucosa of the true vocal folds, you've got the vocalis muscle. But in the mucosa of the fourth vocal folds, you don't have the vocalis muscle. Rather, you've got a lot of glands. So this part here, these are glands. You have a lot of glands. That's where the difference is. So that is orientation. And this diagram was taken from Ross' textbook of histology. Now, let us look at the slides. Okay. So the slides, let's start with the epiglottis. This is the epiglottis. The epiglottis is made up of this epithelium that is non-stratified, non-keratinized. So non-keratinized. Pardon me on that one. Non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Stratified squamous epithelium. And underneath it, you've got this cartilage. So this structure here is cartilage, and this cartilage is elastic cartilage. So whenever you see elastic cartilage, and on top of it the epithelium is non-keratinized stratified squamous, this is the epiglottis. So this is how the epiglottis looks like. Okay, this is at low power. When you look at it at high power, this is how it appears. So you can see here that this is stratified squamous epithelium. Stratified squamous. So squamous. Non-keratinized. It doesn't have keratin. Non-keratinized epithelium. And then underneath it, you see there are muscles here. So these are just bundles of muscles. Okay? So these are just smooth muscles here. Smooth muscles. This pale staining structure here, this is just adipose tissue. Adipose tissue. And then this part here, this is elastic cartilage. Elastic cartilage. This is just the perichondrium, the connective tissue of the cartilage, okay? The perichondrium. So this is how the epiglottis looks like, and this is how you should identify it. All right. Now, this part here is the... So this part here, you can see here, this is squamous epithelium, stratified squamous epithelium. And then underneath it, you've got glands. So this is the fourth vocal fold. Okay. Why? Because you've seen this is the stratified squamous epithelium. Stratified squamous epithelium. And underneath the stratified squamous epithelium, you've got these glands here. So now, this stratified squamous epithelia, if you follow it very carefully, it changes into columnar. So this is simple columnar epithelium. Simple columnar epithelium. So what is happening is that the fourth vocal fold here will now change and it will enter the ventricle. We said that the ventricle, the epithelia changes from stratified squamous epithelium and it changes into simple columnar epithelium. So this slide is showing you how epithelium is going to shift from a stratified squamous epithelium into a simple columnar epithelium when you move from the fourth vocal folds into the ventricle, in the larynx. Okay. Okay, so this is just the same. This is stratified squamous epithelium that is found in the fourth vocal folds, and then it changes into the simple columnar epithelium in the ventricle. Okay, so that was the larynx. Now let's look at the trachea, the histology of the trachea. So at low power, this is the trachea. So this is the trachea. This is the lumen of the trachea. You can see the trachea is made up of pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. Pseudostratified columnar epithelium with cilia. So this is the anterior portion. And then posteriorly, you find an incomplete ring of hyaline cartilage. So this is hyaline cartilage. So this is an incomplete ring of hyaline cartilage because it does not meet with this hyaline cartilage here because there's a disturbance. Here there's what we call a trachealis muscle. Trachealis muscle. So this is how you identify the trachea. The trachea anteriorly has got pseudostratified columnar epithelium, and then posteriorly it has got an incomplete ring of the hyaline cartilage. The hyaline cartilage doesn't form a complete ring because it has got a trachealis muscle. Okay, it has got trachealis muscle. So this is medium power, and then this is high power. So you can see at high power, you've got columnar cells here. You can't really tell if it's one layer or multiple layers, so it's pseudo-stratified columnar. But you notice something that they are goblet cells. So this is a columnar cell, goblet cell, columnar cell, goblet cell, columnar cell, columnar cell, columnar cell, goblet cell, columnar cell, goblet cells. So the epithelia in the trachea has got goblet cells. Okay. So the epithelia in the trachea is pseudostratified columnar epithelia, which has got cilia and is rich in goblet cells. So this has rich in goblet cells. Okay, so what you can see under the epithelia of the trachea here, you can see this. This is simply a blood vessel. How do you know that it's a blood vessel? You've got a lot of red blood cells inside here. So this is simply a blood vessel. Simply a blood vessel. Even this one here is a blood vessel. Even this one is a blood vessel. So you can see that the trachea is rich in blood vessels. It's rich in blood vessels. Okay. So you've got the epithelia here, and then you've got blood vessels here. Apart from the blood vessels, you also have glands like this. This is a gland underneath the trachea. This is also a gland. So you've got the epithelia here, which we've said is pseudo-stratified, columnar, ciliated with goblet cells. You've got blood vessels, a lot of blood vessels, and you also have glands in the submucosa. Okay. So now underneath now you've got this cartilage here, which is hyaline cartilage. We said that the hyaline cartilage in the trachea is incomplete because at the posterior end we've got the trachealis muscle. So let's just go back. Okay. So we said that the hyaline cartilage is the trachea epithelia. Underneath you've got the hyaline cartilage. The hyaline cartilage is not a complete ring because posteriorly there's a trachealis muscle. Okay, so posteriorly there's a trachealis muscle. So underneath the submucosa of the trachea, you've got the hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage. But posteriorly to the trachea, the posterior end of the trachea, there is no cartilage there, but there is a trachealis muscle. So you draw it at high power and you label it as such. Right, now let's look at the histology of the lung. This is the last histology that we are looking at. So under the lung, you're going to look at this basic picture, an entire picture. This is the lung. Okay, so this lung is at low power. You draw everything. This part here that you can see here, this is the bronchus. So this is the bronchus. How do you know that this is the bronchus? Because it has cartilage here. It has hyaline cartilage. So this is cartilage, this is cartilage, this is cartilage here. That's how you know that this is a bronchus. This here, what you see here, this is a bronchiole. Okay. So this is a bronchiole. So a bronchiole doesn't have hyaline cartilage. A bronchus has got hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage. But a bronchiole doesn't have hyaline cartilage. Okay. A bronchiole doesn't have hyaline cartilage. What you see here, these are air sacs. So this is an air sac. Okay. This portion here that is leading to an air sac is what we call an alveoli duct. Alveoli duct. Okay. This one that is small here is a terminal bronchiole. Terminal bronchiole. Terminal bronchiole. Okay, that's a terminal bronchiole. So now, this is just an outline at low power of how a lung looks like. What about this? This is the blood vessel. How do you know? Because there is blood inside here. So this is a blood vessel. Now, let's look at these individual parts at high powers and examine them very closely. So this is the bronchus. Bronchus. How do you know that this is the bronchus? Because it has hyaline cartilage. This is hyaline cartilage here. This is hyaline cartilage here. You know that cartilage is simply a specialized connective tissue. This is hyaline cartilage here. Okay. So now, and then this part here, this is the bronchiole. This is the bronchiole. Bronchioles are at different levels. you've got a primary bronchial, secondary bronchial, tertiary bronchial, terminal bronchial. Then you've got the respiratory bronchial. Okay, so this is a bronchial. A bronchial doesn't have a cartilage, whilst a bronchus has got cartilage. What you see here, this is an air sac. Air sacs are alveoli. Okay, air sac. A continuation where you have like multiple air sacs joining together, but there is no demarcation showing that this is an air sac. This is what we call a respiratory duct, rather an alveoli duct. So this is an alveoli duct. An alveoli duct is what leads to an air sac from a respiratory bronchial. Okay, so draw a bronchus, show all the hyaline cartilage, and show the bronchioles without the hyaline cartilage. Okay, so this is simply a bronchi because it has got pseudostratified columnar epithelia with cilia, but it doesn't have cartilage. Okay. So this is just a scheme, the diagram that is showing how the bronchial looks like. So this is the bronchial. It's thicker and has got a thicker adventitia than the respiratory bronchial. And then the respiratory bronchial moved to an alveoli duct. Okay. So this is how the lung divides into its smaller units. From the terminal bronchial, you go to a respiratory bronchial. From a respiratory bronchial, you go to an alveoli ducts, and the alveoli ducts are the ones that lead into the alveoli sacs. Okay, so now here, let's examine this. This here is an alveoli. So this is an alveoli. Now, this space here, I've seen this space here, which is leading to the alveoli. This space is what we call the alveoli duct. Alveoli duct. These alveoli ducts will now join into these bigger ducts. These bigger ducts are what we call respiratory bronchioles. The respiratory bronchioles are lined with cuboidal epithelium. Okay, the respiratory cuboidals are lined with cuboidal epithelium. And then from the respiratory bronchioles, you go to the alveoli ducts, which are lined with squamous epithelium, which leads to the alveoli, which are lined with simple squamous epithelium. This is a terminal bronchi. Okay. Terminal bronchi. So how it moves is that from the terminal bronchi, you go to a respiratory bronchi. From the respiratory bronchi, you go to the alveolar bronchi. Then the alveolar bronchi will now lead to the alveoli. Okay, will now lead to the alveoli. So draw this and label all of these parts. Okay, these are simply alveolar sacs. So these are alveoli sacs. In the alveolar sacs, you know that you have got simple squamous epithelium that are forming the alveolar sacs, and you also find type 2 pneumocytes. These are type 2 pneumocytes that are producing surfactant. Okay. All right, so that is all about the respiratory histology. After that, you now do the exercise. You contrast epithelium, which is olfactory epithelium, and respiratory epithelium. You list the 5 cells of the respiratory epithelium and their functions. You list the cells of the olfactory epithelium and their functions. And then what is the function of type 1 and type 2 pneumocytes? Then according to their morphology, what type of glands are Bowman's glands and their functions. 6, you explain why the mucosa of the bronchi and the bronchi are highly folded. 7. What are the histological differences of bronchi and bronchioles? And what are club cells, and state their functions. From here, then, you'll be done with this lab. All right, you can register for lessons and access all the videos in histology and all the lessons in anatomy on WhatsApp on this number, +260 975 497790. Excellent Grades Academy offers you lessons in all the courses. All right, don't let your CA suffer. Register with us and start learning. See you in the next video.